Hello and welcome to today's video. So this is the end of my 2 weeks of Neovim challenge. I've been a Vim user for a long time from a sort of a server perspective, doing basic file edits and being able to manipulate things remotely. But the last 2 weeks have been a challenge to use Neovim as my primary editor for Python and C++. And try to turn it into an IDE, turn it into the full development experience that you would expect to see with some of the other maybe more mainstream editors. So that's what this has been. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump in, talk through what I've done to it, how I use it, what this has done for me, from a workflow perspective, and things that it still lacks after a couple of weeks, and then kind of concluding with whether or not this is something that you should try. Hint, it's going to be depending on where you are in your tech journey, the projects you're working on, and a lot more. So right off the bat, I renamed my Neovim configuration, and I just wanted to show you default Neovim. I'm actually going to open my Neovim config, which is init.lua. You can see I renamed it to back. And you can see here that it's a very basic text editor, with some default styling. So let's go ahead and move my init.lua back to init.lua. And you're going to see something a little bit different now. So you can see we've got this nice blue theme. This mimics what I would use in VS Code. This is the Tokyo Night theme. You'll also notice that we have this tree sitter sidebar. So let me get into another project and we can go, I'm going to hop into my C++ projects folder, and I'm playing with some graphics. I'm actually currently learning OpenGL. Very, very beginning of that, but we can go ahead and just open up Neovim here. So let's start with basic usage. So I've got Neovim, I've got tree sitter. If I wanted to go, so all of your standard Vim actions, and if you don't know what a Vim action is, it's the ability to sort of jump around your editor. All of your standard Vim actions work here. So if I want to go down to the bottom, I can do Shift-G. If I want to go up, I can hit K. If I want to go down by 3, I can hit 3J and jump down by 3. I can also use your standard Vim search. So if I want to just jump to shader, I can say / shader, enter, and I've made it down to shader. So you can jump around your menu just like you can your file. If I want to select a file, I can come down here with J or K and hit enter, and that file is now open. If I want to close out the sidebar, now that I've opened a file, I've wired up Control-T as my sidebar close. So I can open and close the sidebar as needed with Control-T. Out of the box, Control WW changes which window you're in. So if you want to go from your sidebar to your editor, you can just Control WW. So now I'm in my editor, and I no longer want to search for ASDF so that it doesn't find anything. I'm sure there's another way to show that. So you'll notice I've got a little error here. So I can Control K. And that shows me a no information available. But what I can also do is do let's see what I pinned to that. I added a keyboard shortcut for show error, and you can see, again, 2 weeks in, that I am forgetting what that keyboard shortcut is. So let's go ahead and hop into init.lua and see what I set. So show errors, I did Shift-E is my error key. Well, that makes sense. E for error. So let's see what that gives us. All right, it's saying expected open paren fix available. So somewhere in here, it is expecting an open paren, and I did not provide one. Probably something like that. All right. So we've got our basic error checking. This is provided by CLang. I've got a similar one for Python. We have the ability to see our errors. And importantly, everything I'm doing here, I'm basically doing without a mouse. Like, I'm not having to click around if I want to go to different files. If I want to, let's just play with that. So if I want to close this file out, it's just the standard :W or :Q. So I've now closed the file. I can go down to my shader.hpp. If I want to close this back out, :Q, and back up to shader CPP. If I want to, this is not so much a Neovim thing, but in Ubuntu, you can jump tabs with Alt and then your tab number. So I don't have to reach around and, take my hands off the keyboard to get to things. That's one of the biggest wins of using this type of workflow, is that once you've got your keyboard shortcuts in, you are just flying around your project without the need to, really click things. Navigation, also kind of the same. Obviously, you can just HJ or JK to go up and down. You can also do things like, Vim motions. You can go down. Let's say I want to go down 10. I'm going to go 10, J. And I've now jumped down 10 lines. I've got configuration for relative line numbers. So what you see over here on the left is relative to my current position. So I know that if I want to jump down to my exception, I can do 17J, and I'm on my exception line. So I can move around the file very, very quickly. If I come down here, I'm just going to do something cout. You'll notice that I've got my autocomplete working. I've got my auto tab, or if I open a set of quotes, it's going to automatically close them. All of that is functional the way you would expect it to be in a standard editor, which is really cool. I also, one of the challenges that I had to work through is I wanted a one-tap build process. And I wanted it to be, and I'll explain one tap in a moment, but I wanted it to be similar to what VS Code has, because I'm still going to bounce back and forth with VS Code for some projects. So in order to make something that was similar, I also wanted to be able to fire it off with Control-Shift-B, since that is the launcher for the default build task in VS Code. So what I did, and by the way, I'm not going through every line of config, but I will upload my entire Neovim config to GitHub and link it in the description here. So in order to get Control-Shift-B working, we are going to find, let's see. Okay, that was in build.lua. So I can go over here, and there's probably a better way to clear search. But here you can see I've got Control-B, and it's calling build.sh. So this was the best way I could think of to mimic a VS Code style tasks.json. So if you're not familiar with it, VS Code has a tasks.json. You can basically put whatever your build commands you want in there, and it's going to, actually, let me hop into one of my ROS projects, because that might be a good place to show this. Let's pull up VS Code and you can see what I'm talking about. So in .VS Code, I have a Oh, I apparently do not have it set up for this one. That is not a good, that is not a good example. Let's see. We'll do Python projects. You can kind of see I split up all my projects by the technology. So I recently did a video on frozen lake Qtable, and that was this project. So if let's see, don't have VS Code for this one. Again, I've been doing Vim for 2 weeks, so I'm looking for something that I have done. I think Mujoko SAC camera. I'm going to have something in. Okay, so in my VS Code here, I have a task.json, and that task.json, you can basically chain various tasks that you want run, and then you can hit Control-Shift-B, and it's going to run those tasks from tasks.json. And in this case, it's kicking off a training run for a robot over here. And actually, that's probably worth talking about from a workflow perspective. So I will usually wire up the main thing I'm doing in task.json, and then extra scripts like test.py in this case. I'm going to do a Control-D. I will use Control-D to run the Python for those. And you can see this guy just started training, so he's not doing so well. But that's kind of beside the point. So that's the kind of functionality I was trying to get back to. So let's go back to Neovim and see how I would do that here. So an equivalent build over here on my shader project, Control-Shift-B is going to run my build.sh, and it's going to launch my little Learn OpenGL window and show me my, very complicated project here that is a multi-shaded triangle. If I close this out, we can go look at build.sh, and you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Is I am, running through your standard build steps, cleaning up the old artifact, going into debug mode, running G++, and then running the code. And the whole point here is just to make things, smooth and very, very fast to run. You'll also notice, and this took some work, but I've got it down here on the bottom of the screen. If I continue to hit my compile command, it is going to continue to stay in this section. So, and ChatGPT was incredibly useful here. I took the time to build out the editor the way I wanted it to be, but I definitely did not take the time to become a Lua expert. A lot of this was, working with the LLMs to help, put together an ideal config, and then just adding one feature at a time, making sure I was backing my configuration up in Git, and making that functional. So if I close out of this and close out of this, and let me show you one more thing about that. So if I escape, that Control WW is how you bounce from window to window, regardless of what window it is. So I can just close out of that. I can close out of Tree Sitter and close out of this. I'm going to do one more thing on my graphics demo tab before we move on from it, because I think this is useful and kind of speaks to the way I use my editor a lot of the time. So one of the normal things I'll do is go and watch a tutorial video or read an article on how to do something. And if you've got this giant sidebar up here, that can be kind of annoying. And if you're using something like VS Code, obviously you can drag this over, you can minimize it, but it's not something that is fast to do. So over here, I can just hit Control-T, and I now have, I'll open up a shader CPP. That makes it a little more obvious, but I have a lot of flexibility around, whether I want my menu open, And if I want to go full screen for a minute and get my menu, which obviously you can have it not full screen, but I've got a key combo wired up for, okay, let's see, full screen, and I've got my menu. If I wanted to close my menu, open my menu, snap back to right, that's all stuff I can do from my keyboard. And then, again, Control WW, Control T, I'm back in my sort of expanded text view where I can sit here and follow the tutorial without having to, click around throughout the thing to get where I want to go. Obviously, I still have to use my mouse on my browser, but, minimizing use there. I also, a pro here, and you can go, you can obviously change font sizes and anything. But for video production, I think this is a little bit easier to, open up a file and then focus on that one file with a very large font size. I think that probably makes it easier for you guys to see what I'm doing when I'm doing these types of videos. So I see it as a win for that. There are a lot of advantages here. So let's talk about the disadvantages, because there's obviously a reason that people don't just do this. One big disadvantage, especially if you are newer to tech, newer to code, is that you may not know what you want your IDE to do. If you are starting with something like, especially something like Visual Studio or, IntelliJ, JetBrains, those all have an opinionated workflow. They come with a, you open up PyCharm, it's going to have a Run Python button that, runs your current file. You don't have to really know. It's not that you don't have to know what you're doing, but you're starting with a tool built for developers that someone had a strong opinion about how to make work. And there's a lot of advantages to that as a newer developer, having tools that are just, hey, this is the tool, this is what it does. You're not expected to configure it. Getting Neovim up and running required me to know exactly what I wanted it to do, what behavior I wanted, what I expected out of it. And then you can see here, this is, here, I'm going to do a set number to give us an absolute line number. So my main init.lua is 192 lines of code to get this thing up and running. This got everything from, auto pairs, the fact that if you put in a quote or a paren, it auto pairs it. That's a configuration item. That's not something that just happens. The sidebar is a configuration item. That's tree sitter. Vim fugitive, the get window, is something. Here, let's show that off because that's fun. So I'm source controlling my own code here. I just did :get. I can hit a dash to stage this. I can hit CC to commit. And latest working Lua config as of 2-week YouTube update. There you go. Now you have an exact commit, and then I can do my same escape :WQ, escape :Q, and get out of it, and I can do git push. Again, all from my keyboard, no mouse. But going back to the file over here, so getting that functionality was Vim fugitive. Getting, the ability to do code comments was another line, was another thing I had to add. Now, obviously, I can just type my comments in by hand, but a pretty standard thing to want to do is do Control and / and comment. And getting that working was, was a key map. It was remap true toggle line comment, for this GCC and GC command. So there's a lot here. Again, we started this part of the conversation talking about negatives. If you didn't know exactly what you wanted and you didn't know what you were building and why you were building it, this would be really, really difficult. It's not going to come in with a strong opinion about how your editor and your experience should be set up, which is kind of the exact reason that I think people who are more experienced love it, because you know what you want it to be. You don't want to have to reach for your mouse. You want to be able to just type commands and have your machine do what you want it to do. So I think that's kind of your two user bases, is if you want to lean on a lot of what's already built, but you're comfortable with it being maybe a little bit slower from a workflow standpoint, then your traditional IDEs are going to be a lot better. If you are going for absolute maximum workflow, then I think something like Vim, Neovim, can be that. And it's incredibly good in that space, but it takes a lot of work to get there. Pretty much everything that I've wanted this thing to do, I have needed to go and dig through Google, pull up ChatGPT, go to my resources and figure out how to make it do what I wanted it to do. Even the show diagnostic under cursor that we talked about earlier, like that is a key map function. That's not something that just happened. So let's kind of talk through like what I'm probably doing going forward. I don't know that I'm going back to VS Code anytime soon for, sort of your standard Python, C++ development. I am going to be using VS Code for situations where it ties into other tools. I'm running through a game dev course right now using not Unity. I'll remember the other one in a moment. Unreal Engine. I'm running through an Unreal Engine course right now and learning a little bit about that. And that's a situation where Unreal is, both the instructors using VS Code. Unreal has a default option to open in VS Code. It's clearly, it has a default build task that goes well with VS Code. So that's an area where it's just a lot easier to say, yep, I'm going to use the tool that is provided in the course. And I think that's generally a good strategy, is if it's an area that you're not as comfortable with, or it's an area that, you have existing tooling built up for, there are a lot of advantages to using what is, I think at this point, the most popular code editor, VS Code, or whatever, editor is in play in your environment. But for sort of ultimate workflow setup, if you know exactly what you want out of your editor, you don't want to, you don't want to get off your keyboard. You want to just be able to use shortcuts, for everything. Then something like Neovim is incredibly useful. I also, and I'm going to go down into a little bit more of a niche here, programmable keyboards are a thing that makes Neovim use much, much simpler. So for me, I am using a Digma Defy, and they have a thumb cluster concept, and that allows you to map multiple functions, macros to thumb clusters, or really any key, and that it also makes this much easier. So for me, escape:"Q bang to close this out is one button. Closing this out is one button. And this is not a programmable keyboards conversation, so I'm not going to dig too far into it. But if I wanted to, well, here I'll show you Basecore. I love their software. Also, Basecore is a misspelling. They do not add the E, but I did, and in my local config. And that I'm just going to live with it permanently because I now think of it with an E. So I've got Vim Q mapped to this thumb cluster macro. So I can literally come in here. I've got Vim quit, force, escape, Q, and then it shows 1, but it's right shift 1. So you can basically record a macro and then just map it to a key. So you can kind of see here where I can, that's escape Q, that's quit, that's Vim save, that's Control Shift B. So when we come back over here to my editor scenario, so save is a key, Control Shift B is a key to run my code. So I know that is going way down the rabbit hole. That's probably not something most people have, but that is another scenario where, if you're combining these things starts to have an outsized effect from a workflow perspective. If I had to type escape WQ, one, there's probably faster ways to do it. I'm using the tools that I'm used to. I'm sure there's a better way to close a window than typing the whole thing every time. If you're already in command mode, just Q would work. But having those things, at a tap is really, really useful. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I will upload my config as it sits to GitHub and post the link in the description. I'll also post the link to the keyboard I'm using in the description. No affiliation. I bought this. They're ridiculously expensive, but I love them. Drop me a comment if you'd like me to dig into more content around Neovim and editor configuration, or custom ergonomic programmable keyboards. I will happily talk about either. And with that, I'm going to say until next time.